Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina. I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar Improving Communication and Collaboration Using Office 365, which will be presented by Matt Walton from Info Exchange. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any questions during the session, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel, and Matt will be able to answer that at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you have any technical issues, please also type it in the questions box and I'll be able to help you out with that through there. Please note that if you're on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. Please, if possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience possible today. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording will be sent out to you within this week after the webinar ends. You'll be able to access it at any given time after that. That's all from me for now. I'll pass it over to Matt to get things started.
Thanks, Tina, and welcome everyone to today's webinar on improving communication and collaboration using Office 365. So it's an exciting topic for me. Hopefully you can say the same, particularly by the end of this session. I'm hoping that you've got a good overview of how Office 365 can help your organisation. So as I think some of you would already know, so my name's Matt. I'm a consulting services manager at Info Exchange, and we basically work with a whole range of not-for-profits across the sector, doing all sorts of different services that they deliver to the community, and all shapes and sizes. So as you can see, even there, we've got tiny ones with just a couple of volunteers, up to ones that are state or nationwide, or some of them are international as well, and thousands of staff. So as you can imagine, there will be different Office 365 solutions or technical solutions to all of their problems. So each one of these organisations, plus hundreds of others, they all use it quite differently. So unfortunately, there's no cookie cutter that I can just provide you today that will be exactly the same for everyone. But hopefully I'll give enough examples that you will be able to get a sense of what will work for your organisation. And I will try and be as practical as possible today to really give that sense of how their solutions will work for you and how they've worked in the past with other not-for-profits we've worked with, or even based on mine and my staff's experience with not-for-profits. So we've all worked for not-for-profits. I'm actually from the community sector before I got into IT. So yeah, hopefully we can bring all that today. As Tina said, I will pause at halfway for questions, as well as say some questions at the end. So feel free to put some in the chat, and yeah, we'll stop for a break in about half an hour. So the key things that we're going to cover today is starting off quite general, particularly for those who aren't fully across Office 365. I want to give that high-level overview of what is Office 365, what are some common uses of 365 in the sector, what do you get free, most importantly, and then what are the things that you might want to pay for, what's in the current suite of Office 365, what should you think about when deciding which tools to use, and then I'll walk through 8 common scenarios. Now, it was actually hard to narrow it down to 8, but these are the most common things that we see with our clients coming to us saying, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, and Office 365 can do that across these 8. I'll also talk a little bit about what's next and some general tips, and one of the most useful things for you, I think, are the last couple of slides where we'll put links on to the next step. So obviously you're not going to get everything answered today in 1 hour, but hopefully I can at least direct you to some of the other services and resources that are online and available to you. So that's the agenda today. I hope that's going to meet everyone's needs. but we'll get cracking and see how we go. So, as most of you know, Office 365 is a Microsoft product, platform really, that not-for-profits can access. And to be honest, all organisations and even individuals can access Office 365 as well. But what we're talking about today is the not-for-profit offering. And as you can see on the screen there, that's actually a menu bar that I've taken a screenshot of in Office 365, which basically has a whole suite of applications. Now, my first comment always is I don't expect everyone to use all of these. I don't even use all of these. So it's more just what's available to you. So it's like a bit of a shopping list to say, here is what Microsoft are offering you and giving you as part of the Office 365 suite. But it's up to you which one of those you use. So most not-for-profits might only use half of those. But feel free to click on that link and see a bigger picture. Basically, Microsoft hosts all of these for you in servers. The servers are in Sydney and Melbourne, so anyone worried about where the servers are, they've got all these security, and I might have a slide at the end for those interested in security, or I can follow up with some additional questions. But essentially, they've got a whole range of security certifications and processes in place to ensure that your data is secure. So some of the common things that we see not-for-profits using Office 365 for, which hopefully will give you more of a sense of what will work for you, is on this slide here. Now, I won't read through all of these, but it just gives you an idea. So while we're talking about security, it is based in Australia. There's less of a need for backups because there's some inbuilt redundancy around recycle bins and things like that. It also includes things like a spam security. So it's called Exchange Online Protection. So if you get Office 365 emails, you get some of that with them. You also get password security that's improved. Now, you can always add more, and some people have third-party spam solutions as well, but or additional mobile device management tools. But by default, for free, all of these things are available in the Office 365 suite. Now, some of the things that not-for-profits also use that you don't automatically think of when you think of Office 365 is things like forms and dashboards, booking of resources and rooms and project management. So there's all these tools around productivity that help improve efficiency and communication and working together. Also reduce a lot of that paper forms and manual handling and hundreds of Excel spreadsheets. So that's one of the key things that it can do as well. One of the most common things that we get asked to set up Office 365 for is document management. So people getting rid of their file servers and wanting to put all their documents on something like SharePoint or OneDrive. So that's quite a common solution. Email is probably the most common solution where calendars, contacts, emails, that's a pretty no-brainer really to have on something like Office 365, where instead of having a local Exchange server, Microsoft just look after all that for you for free, basically. Video conferencing, so you get Skype for Business. You also can get mobility, so that each of these apps, whether it's Skype for Business or SharePoint or OneDrive or Teams, all have mobile apps. So it's getting better and better and easier to access all of these online. Now, some of the traditional uses of tools like Office 365 is around staff communication. So whether it's an intranet or a knowledge base or discussion boards or instant messaging. So there's various ways that you can communicate. But that's some of the most common ones that we get to set up SharePoint, for example. So they're just some common ones that I'm hoping will give you just spark some ideas around what you can use it for. But that's definitely not a comprehensive list, and it's not all you can do. So, but hopefully it's a good start. So most importantly, what do you get for free? So this is what most people ask us, actually, and Microsoft have very generously over the last few years offered Office 365 for free. This is in addition to the donation program that Connecting Up run as well, where you can get a lot of licenses, and whether it's Office or server licenses for free for not-for-profits or discounted as well. So most of what I talked about in the last slide is actually free for not-for-profit. So the common one is you actually get Exchange, which is email, basically, calendars and contacts. So you actually get 50 gig of Exchange mailbox per user and an unlimited amount of users. So we've got organisations with thousands of users and thousands of mailboxes for free. And each of those mailboxes gets 50 gig. Each user also gets a terabyte of OneDrive storage. So that's another huge benefit that people can use for storing documents and working documents. You can also get a quota of storage for your organization on applications like SharePoint. So your intranet can have this shared storage of a terabyte plus 500 meg per user. You can also get the basic mobile apps and Office Online, which is the web apps. And what a lot of people don't know is you actually get 24/7 support and hosting all included. So everything I've mentioned on this slide is all free when you have the E1 or E2 licenses. Now, there is actually some other business premium licenses, which are for smaller organizations. That are free, or the Business Essentials is free, and that's also free. But what we're suggesting is the E1 is actually more functional and you get more things and it's free, so you may as well upgrade to that license. So that's typically what we recommend. Now, the licensing can get a little complicated, but the E1 is generally where you would start. But this flows into some of the other complicated things where you do get E1, but some of our organisations, some of the not-for-profits, choose to buy products in addition to the free. Now, you don't have to. We know some organisations that can manage on the free products, which is perfectly fine and ideal. However, the most common thing that people want to buy through Office 365 is Office, which is Office 2016, which is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, installed on your desktop PC. Now, you can use Office Online, which is the web browser, which is free and it works fine. But typically we say it probably does about 80% of what Word or Excel on the desktop do. So there are some limitations with the online versions. So that's why typically people go off and buy Office. Now, you can also buy Office through Connecting Up, which many of you have been doing for years, and you can still continue to do that. But if you want the online version that you just download through Microsoft and you can install on up to 5 devices and pay for on a monthly basis, that's the product where you either buy Pro Plus for $4.84 or Business Premium for $4.18 or E3 for $6.71. So you actually get Office with all of those plans, including the E5 there. The difference between all of those is the E3 also comes with some more advanced functions. So Legal Hold is the most common one, where it stores all of your information that you send and receive even after you delete it. The E5 plan is if you're wanting to use Office 365 and Skype for Business as your telephony solution, which is PABX. So that's where you buy the $22 per user per month, and then you would also need a phone plan on top of that where you get your external calls. Now, there's a whole heap of other things I won't go into too much detail on, but lots of little add-ons that you can just do. So Project and Visio you used to have to do buy as a piece of software that you then install. This is just a monthly subscription. So I know that's a little bit complicated, but I just thought it was worth raising that. Feel free to put any questions in the chat box or contact me afterwards if the licensing doesn't make sense. because there is it's quite tricky. So yeah, click on the link there as well, which will give you more detail. And for those that have an Office 365 tenant already set up, you can actually go into the billing section of that and look at all these licenses and get a bit more detail there as well. So I hope that's helped clarify things. Now, this is another thing that could potentially confuse you, but what I actually, this isn't mine that I developed, this is created by a guy called Matt Wade, and it helps explain what I call the ecosystem of Office 365 and all of the different applications within that and how they fit together. Now, again, I won't talk through each one, but I just hope this starts getting you thinking about which applications you want to use and which you've already got another solution for. So you may already have, a great tool for project management, for example. You may be using Trello or Smartsheet or something like that. So you don't have to use Planner or Project Online. You may already be using a dashboarding tool like Tableau, so you don't necessarily have to use Power BI. The great thing about them all being in the one platform means that it is one username and password, and it's one sort of licensing arrangement for everything. So as a person starts, you give them the Office 365 account, and then it's just that one account that they use for all of these things. So that's something that is worth exploring. The other good thing about Office 365 is it's constantly changing. Now, some people say that's a bad thing, but I see it as a positive that Microsoft are constantly developing in these new tools. So these tools are constantly being developed and improving. Now, the question I always get from my clients is, which tools should I use for my organization? And this is what I'm going to help explain through the rest of this webinar. But some of the things that, from a collaboration perspective, I like this diagram that helps explain when to use which tool. So unfortunately, nowadays, there's a whole range of different ways to communicate. And there's not really one tool that you use for everything. So traditionally, a lot of people use email for everything. But we're moving away from that, and we're moving more to these sort of video chats or webinars. We're moving into chats and discussion groups like Teams and Yammer. We're moving into project collaboration and working on documents together like Planner and Groups. We're working on video a lot more. We're working on intranets and team sites where we're working on projects and documents together. So there's a whole heap of new ways to work. And as you can see along the bottom there, it really depends on the audience, whether you're contacting a person or a team or your whole organization. So again, I instant message. If I'm just talking to one of my staff, I instant message quite regularly using Skype for Business. But if I'm wanting to post to my whole organization at Info Exchange, I'll use Yammer. It also depends on how quickly you want them to respond, and also whether it's more informal or formal. So yeah, if I'm promoting a new policy, I'll put that on the intranet. Whereas if I'm just having a chat and talking about someone's birthday or cake in the kitchen or some other more informal thing, I'll put that on Yammer as well. So these are some of the things to think about when you're deciding which tool to use, and even once you've got the suite of tools, on a day-to-day basis, which tool to post information on. Now, Tina, I might pause for a second just to give people a chance to ask some questions before I go into some specifics and some scenarios around Office 365. So if anyone's got any questions on licensing or particular products or hosting or security or any of that, now's probably a good time to do that.
We have a question from Peter. He says, when I have come to add an app from the store to SharePoint, it tells me that I cannot install the app because I'm not the tenant administrator, even though I'm logged on as the system administrator who is the global administrator. How do I overcome this?
Yeah, that's probably a pretty technical and specific question, but with a lot of those type of scenarios, what I would do, I would actually log that with Microsoft as it just seems like a basic permission issue. So firstly, I'd check who your tenant administrator is. It's probably your IT provider, to be honest. And there are restrictions on tenants and some settings on the tenant that might stop you installing third-party apps. So when you're looking at these third-party add-ins, Microsoft's getting better at including all these third-party add-ins. It's always good to do a bit of research around are there costs involved? Are there restrictions on your tenant? Are they the right solution? So typically we recommend using as much out of the box in standard Office 365 as possible. There's quite a lot of functional things in there before using third parties. So the next step for Peter I would log a ticket. First check with the tenant and then leverage the free Microsoft support.
That's all for questions for now.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. I'll save some time at the end. So if anyone thinks of anything else, feel free to pop it in. So I thought I would talk through, as I touched on before, the top sort of 8 scenarios that we see being really helpful for not-for-profits. And the first of those is team communication. So if you ask Microsoft, or if you see a lot of the new communication and marketing coming out of Microsoft, it's all about Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is going to be a really big focus for Microsoft and the Office 365 platform in the future. So it's essentially the equivalent of Slack, if anyone's heard of Slack. Microsoft have used Slack as a bit of a base to work from when they've built Teams. So it's a new way of communicating. So it's not quite different from the old intranet style or the email. It's a place that you go to in the morning when you first log in. So, when I open up my computer, Teams automatically opens and I go there first to see what's been happening across the different teams. So it's that central hub. Now, this can capture emails, it can capture chat, it can capture video, it can capture third-party or in other apps. So you can present your SharePoint documents or your Salesforce information. You can access it through the desktop app or the web browser or the mobile app. And you can also embed other calendars and videos and OneNote and anything in there. So really what it's trying to do, it's trying to become that hub that displays information from both internally and externally. So go back to Peter's point, there are a lot of third-party apps that you can actually present through Teams. And it's actually easier to present them through Teams than it is through SharePoint. So that might be another way to get around Peter's problem. But so the teams there, essentially you would structure your team, you create a new team according to your structure or particular projects that you're working on or groups that you're wanting to have discussions in. And then under each team, you can configure the tabs and display whatever information you want. So what I'd say is that it's at least worth trying or piloting for some of your projects or some of your groups to see how relevant it is. And I think what you'll find is some people pick this stuff up a lot quicker than others. Some people prefer the chat and the video calls instead of the emails and the static intranets. So it is more a dynamic platform, but it's really good at embedding other parts of Office 365. So most of our teams, we have our Power BI dashboards actually showing within the team. You have your SharePoint documents showing. So if there was one thing that I would encourage people to look at for communication and collaboration within your teams, Microsoft Teams would be the product for that. Now, I'm not saying there's still value in SharePoint and some of these other tools that I'll talk about in a minute, but Teams is one. The other interesting thing that is coming on the roadmap is Microsoft is further integrating Skype for Business, which is the video and communication platform, with Teams. So in the future, their vision is that you won't actually need to go separately in Skype for Business to do messaging or video calls. You would just go into Teams and do your video calls and messaging through there. So that would almost reduce the need to log into Skype for Business. You would just use Teams for all of that. All right. So that's one scenario that we see becoming more and more common in not-for-profits. Instead, or as well as building a big intranet, it's using these platforms in a bit more of a casual way to communicate and collaborate. All right. So moving on to our management dashboard. So this is another one that you would have heard in the sector about the trend around data, about data becoming more and more popular and more important for a management dashboard. So data can be all sorts, and it could be for all sorts of people. So I've got here the example of a management dashboard, but you could also use it for your board, for your workers as well, to see client trends or client information. And you can, as we said, display this data through a product called Power BI. That can also integrate with Teams and SharePoint. So you could actually see it through one of those other apps, or a web browser, or a mobile app as well. Basically, it's a business intelligence tool similar to Tableau. If anyone's used Tableau in the sector, that's quite popular as well. And what it can do, it can display data from a whole range of sources. So the simplest way is you can just link it to an Excel spreadsheet, which is quite simple, or a SharePoint list, or your client management system, or your finance system, or third-party data sources like the Australian Bureau of Statistics, or HW data, which is the homeless sector data. So you can link it with other data sources and have all of that data feeding into one dashboard that presents to your staff or your management. It's a reasonably easy tool, but we have had consultants that are doing work with clients to get this right. We've also seen other clients be able to do a lot of this themselves. So it might be something you can dabble with. Really, the critical thing behind making a successful dashboard and having your data add value is a lot of the work around data management, data governance, getting your data right before you put it in these systems. But they are pretty cool tools. They're interactive. You can drill down. You can filter, filter by location, for example, or filter by service type. And they're really cool tools that are pretty user-friendly nowadays. So I would expect that every not-for-profit we deal with has some use for Power BI. Now, whether that's just for the board or management, or whether that has a broader impact. I know marketing teams use this to pull in Google Analytics data and other sorts of data. I know service delivery teams use it to track even staff attendances or client outcomes. So it's a very, very powerful tool, and Power BI is another one that the base license for Power BI is free. You can buy sort of pro licenses if you need sort of more sharing on particular dashboards, but you can essentially have one person develop a dashboard and put it on your SharePoint intranet or on Teams for free. So that's another really generous thing through Microsoft. All right, moving on to boards. So every not-for-profit has a board or a committee, and almost all of them need a spot to share information and store information. Now, many of the ones I've seen, they already have a Dropbox account or a Google Docs or a Google Forms or Sheets or some form of storage. Now, there are lots of board portal apps as well that some people have, which are good. But again, you've got a SharePoint site, for example, for free. We've seen this work quite well, quite commonly, where you set up a SharePoint site. You have secure permissions to your board members. Now, you can do this with an Office 365 account if you want to give them an Office 365 account, or you can use an external account. So if they've got a Microsoft account, a Hotmail account or something like that, you can give them access via that third-party account. And once they're in there, then they can get access to, whether it's documents, you can do meeting minutes, agendas, policies. But in addition to documents, you can also do calendars, you can do notes, you can do projects, you can do tasks, you can do dashboards, you can do, communication, discussion, that sort of thing. So it's a good spot to have a central hub where you've got control and storage of all of that information for your board. So instead of all this information going off and living in, Gmail accounts and Dropboxes and other tools all over the place, it's in your Office 365 portal, which you can manage as an organisation and store. When those board members leave, you've got the information for when the new board members come in next year. So it's another scenario that we see quite common for not-for-profits that want some way to communicate and collaborate with their board, who are volunteers that they only see once a month. Projects is the other one, which is becoming more and more common in the not-for-profit sector. And to be honest, there are more and more tools out there for project management. So we often go and work with organisations and we say, what are you using currently? And they'll reel off this whole long list of, Trello, Smartsheet, Asana, there's a whole heap of them out there. And again, they all are good for fit for purpose. Some are paid, some are free. The one that I'm going to touch on today is called Planner, which is a reasonably new tool that Microsoft have developed, and it's similar to Trello, which is more for that agile style communication and project management. So it's those little dashboards and the little like the post-it notes sort of Kanban board where you can put in little tasks up on a board and move those around, track progress, categorize the boards if you want to. So again, it's a pretty, user-friendly tool, and it's something that you can have a little play with and dabble without sort of breaking anything. But it is a good central spot to do that cross-team collaboration. So if you're working on a policy development or a social committee or something that's across the organisation, it's good for that, and to have that communication. It's actually not the only tool for project management in Office 365. So SharePoint, you can actually do project sites in Office 365 as well, which I've used many, many times successfully. And with SharePoint sites, you can actually integrate Microsoft Project. So I've done several projects where we've set up a SharePoint task list and synchronized Microsoft Project with that task list, so that a lot of people can just see the tasks through SharePoint, but one or two project managers can do a lot of the work with creating and managing the tasks in Microsoft Project. So when I select a tool, it's always based on how I'm going to work. So if I'm really, there's lots of dependencies and this need Gantt charts and very detailed project management methodology, then possibly Microsoft Project would be suitable, and maybe a SharePoint site to help communicate that. Whereas if it's more a casual, agile approach to projects, or some people use this just to manage their own tasks, and I do that as well, and I find it quite helpful just to have that spot to manage tasks, which I know you can do in Outlook as well. So, again, you weigh up both, which one suits you. So, yeah, Projects and documenting tasks is something that not-for-profits are doing more of, and Planner is a really good tool to explore for that type of functionality. So have a look. There's also To-Do. So there's a whole list of options, and this is where it gets a little confusing, but I expect Microsoft will keep investing in Planner, and also integrates well with things like Teams. So there is a level of Outlook integration with Planner as well. So I'd have a little play with that and explore that as well. All right, new user process. So this is one and that I see quite commonly done badly in terms of creating new users, filling out forms, storing information. And it's not just new users, it's all sorts of forms. If we walk into any organization, they would be able to provide 50 paper forms that they use on a day-to-day basis. Now, the new user process is an internal process, and this is a good example where we've actually set up a form. Now, this one, we've actually done it both in InfoPath as an example. You could use forms or you could use Power Apps. So there's actually a few different form tools. And basically that's how you collect the information to input the data. Now, once the data is inputted, it's actually stored in SharePoint on an ongoing basis. So you have a SharePoint list that stores this data. And then from SharePoint, you can actually use a tool like Flow to automate workflow and notifications. So me as a manager, I would fill out the new starter form to say, yep, I'm employing a new staff. Once I click submit, that data would be stored in SharePoint so I can see it, but it would also send email notifications to several people in my organization, the facilities person, for example, because they would now know, yes, I need to give this person an alarm code, a pass, a uniform. The IT people would get a notification saying, yep, they need a new computer, they need an Office 365 account, etc. And then those people would go back into the SharePoint list and update it once they've actioned their tasks. And then workflows would then come back to me saying, yep, the computer's ready, the 365 account's ready, the pass card's ready, all of those things. And I could monitor that through Power BI if I wanted to, or monitor that through the SharePoint list. So there's a whole heap of functionality there. Now, Flow and can get a little technical, so you might need some help with that, but Forms is a really easy form tool, more for use for basic surveys and those sort of things. When you want to get a bit more complex, that's where InfoPath and those other tools come in. Power Apps is really good, particularly for mobile applications. So if you're wanting to do a lot, if you've got staff out on site on iPads, then something like Power Apps would be most suitable. So that's some of the factors for how you choose which form to use. And when I say new user process, just think of any sort of scenario where you're collecting information. So it could be an incident report or a maintenance request or even an IT request or any of those sort of data collection processes where there's tasks created. So when you're exploring what to do with Office 365, have a look at that sort of functionality. So SharePoint lists and those forms and apps are a really cool thing that can add efficiency and just reduce the amount of paper and manual sort of processes that you have. All right. Another one that we're seeing as well is when you communicate externally. So there's platforms like Yammer, Teams and groups can do this as well. But I thought I'd use Yammer as an example, where you set up a group and allow third parties to communicate with each other. So parent committees is one where I've seen it work quite well. And really what Yammer is good for is that discussion. It's like the Facebook for business. So announcements and discussion. So it's not really designed for very task focused or document focused. It's more a discussion group. So we use Yammer internally for our sort of casual discussion and news. So you can create different groups, and you can use either the desktop app, the mobile app, or the web browser. It can integrate with SharePoint sites as well, which we have embedded in our intranet. So if you've got an external group that does a lot of discussion, you could explore Yammer for that. If you've got an external group that is more document or task focused, then that's probably more a SharePoint or Teams environment. So just when you're looking with externals, again, if those externals are volunteers, you may be able to, or you may choose to get them a license to log into your platform. However, most of these are third-party applications where they would use their Gmail accounts to create a Microsoft account to log in. So you can use those sort of third-party applications or Microsoft accounts to log into some of these tools like Yammer. All right. Now, the most common one that I couldn't not put on here is replace your file server. Now, again, it's not suitable for everyone. So, we have everyone come to us and say, I want to replace my file server, and probably 3/4 of the time we go, yep, that's fine. We can do that with SharePoint. But some people who've got really complex documents or huge quantities of documents or access databases or massive videos and images and those sort of things, it's often not always a good idea to put all of those type of things on an online platform like SharePoint or OneDrive. But there are other solutions for those as well. So, but particularly for smaller, quite simple or medium-sized organizations that are from different offices or working from home or out and about, SharePoint and OneDrive can be great. So OneDrive is more for individual documents, so my personal working documents. SharePoint is your organizational intranet or file share basically. And you can access the files either through your browser with Word Online, your desktop through the sync tool, which is the yellow folders there on the left, or the mobile app. So this is SharePoint OneDrive mobile app as well. So you can have offline files through the local sync tool, which means you can work on them on the plane and then they synchronize back up when you get back online. And every document that you store in SharePoint or OneDrive has some really good functionality around version history, managing permissions, co-authoring for, collaboration means you have multiple people working on the one document at once. And it does work well with Office 2016. So if you've got 2016, you can access that functionality like co-authoring. And again, you can do this with Word Online and Excel Online if you want, but most clients would have that local version of Office as well. So obviously, if you're migrating to SharePoint from a file server, there's a migration approach where you have to upload all the documents. There is actually a reasonably new tool in the Office 365 admin portal, which is a data migration tool that can help you migrate data. I just finished a do-it-yourself workshop where I had a 3-week series of showing people how to migrate data and set up an intranet on 365. So that was a good example of a lot of small organizations moving to SharePoint and using various tools to upload their data, as well as do the projects around change management and training and all of those things that go with replacing your file server. So I wouldn't just go ahead and do it one weekend without telling you stuff. There's a bit of a process involved in that. All right. The other one that I often see with organizations is having a separate, PowerPoint presentation or something with the org chart, or a separate Excel list of everyone's phone numbers and titles and names and email addresses and those sort of things. But what most people don't actually know is that Office 365 actually manages all that information already for you. So most people already have that when they set up their Office 365 accounts, or when they've got a local Active Directory on their server that synchronizes through AOD Connect to Office 365. So all of that information, so for example, my phone number, my email address, my title, who my manager is, who my staff are, is already all in Delve, which means anyone can go to Delve and see that at any time and contact me or see what I've been working on, what projects I'm working on. Now, they only see what they've got permission to see, so they won't see my latest document that is just secure and private to me. But if I'm working on shared documents, they can go and see that. Or likewise, I can go and see what documents my staff are working on, and that helps collaboration. Delve is also getting better at doing analytics tools. So I get a report every week that says, hey, this is how many meeting hours and active minutes and emails and those sort of things you've done this week. So yeah, it's getting a lot smarter about how we connect people and how you show your profiles. So that was the last of the 8 scenarios. So I'm hoping that at least a few of those scenarios have sparked something in you to go, yes, that is something that could work for my organization. Now, in addition to those, Microsoft is constantly changing Office 365. So these are some of the things that are coming up on the roadmap, and some of the things that we've been waiting for or have recently happened. Now, there's a link at the bottom so that you can actually monitor the roadmap on an ongoing basis and see what Microsoft are up to in terms of what they're developing. So here are some top 8, I suppose, of what's next in Office 365. One of the things we've been waiting for a while is telephony. So in Skype for Business. So using Skype for Business and Office 365 as your phone system. Now, this has been available all around the world for a while, but Microsoft have been in discussions with Telstra for quite a while, and they've just recently in July launched what they're calling Office 365 Calling by Telstra, which basically means as part of your Office 365 tenant, you can buy an E5 license and then also buy a call plan from Telstra and use Skype for Business as your phone system. So some people are still exploring that. There's also the hosted Skype for Business, which many of our clients have, where another third-party vendor who hosts Skype for Business on servers and allow people to make phone calls, run your reception desk, have video calls, all of that sort of integrated telephony, or what they call unified communications. So that's so I would, if you're looking at replacing your phone system in the next sort of year, I'd explore that, whether it's the hosted Skype for Business or the Telstra offering. I'd compare that and compare the pricing. But remember, you do need E5 licenses, which is $20 a user a month, plus a call plan, which is often $8 a user a month or something like that. So, balance up that $30 a month with all your other sort of options. But at least this one, you don't need infrastructure, you don't need to buy servers or PABXs. And in many cases, you can use headsets instead of phones, which might save you some money on the phones as well. So I'd have a look at that. The Files on Demand OneDrive sync tool has been launched recently. So, traditionally the sync tool did cause issues for people with the syncing, but that's getting better and better. And the modern experience in SharePoint, which is basically a new look and feel, has been around a little while now, 6 months, but it's getting better and better as well. So those things are encouraging more and more people to start using documents more and more in Office 365 and SharePoint. Now, the new apps, they're constantly putting out new apps. So for those on the sort of the business premium plans or the business essentials plans, and even those on education plans, so each type of plan actually has different apps. So the Business Center one, for example, has got a few more around small business, so bookings and invoicing and those sort of things. So it's actually, they're trying to target that a lot more. So if you're on an education plan, for example, they're doing more around managing classroom with OneNote and those sort of things. So according to your plan, you'll get new apps. Now, the other one that you'll get, and we've talked about some of these already, is Teams and Power Apps and Flow and Forms. Now, a lot of these were new tools over the last 6 to 12 months. So they're now constantly maturing and they're getting more reliable and better and better. So I would, give them a go. Even if you tried them 6 months ago and they were a bit buggy or you had some issues, I'd try them again now. And the other thing that these things are doing is integrating better. So I know SharePoint is constantly having new web parts where you can display, some of this other content, whether it's Power BI, in SharePoint. And likewise with Teams, is getting more and more options to embed Power BI graphs and Power Apps and those sort of things within your teams. Now, the other thing that you might have noticed, and there was a few media releases both through us and Connecting Up around the licensing changes. So now there's a few different options for buying licenses. So for example, Info Exchange are a CSP. So we actually can sell Office 365 licenses through us instead of going through your portal, for example, directly. And there are lots of others. So your local IT provider might be coming to you saying, buy your licenses through us. You can still get a lot of the donations through Connecting Up, which is great, but there is some limitations to that now. So some things that you might have used to get through Connecting Up, Microsoft are now pushing to the more of the cloud-based direct through Office 365 or a CSP. So keep an eye out for that as well. A couple more, just the improved insights into work habits with My Analytics and Delve, and just that understanding of, okay, let's improve productivity by making sure I'm, having lots of time to work and not just in emails or meetings the whole time. Security and compliance is constantly getting better as well. So if you're having an increased focus on security, as most organizations do, there are things like two-factor authentication, encryption, mobile device management that you can do in Office 365. Most for free as well. There are some paid things as well. All right, so that's what's next. So to summarize, here are some top tips. So I've touched on some of this already, but, and as you can see, most of these are not technical things. These are things to think about as you're planning. Only use what adds value to your organization. So we see all the time people going off and trying to roll out this cool new tool, and then the service staff or the people in your organization go, they don't use it. So adoption becomes an issue, and they go, I don't need it. I don't want it. Why are you making me use this new tool? It's not adding value. So have a think about that before you roll out each tool, and think about how you use it. So if those service staff are out with their tablets speaking to clients, how are they going to use your new SharePoint intranet on that tablet, or how will it work? So really think through some of that. And the third one, explain the benefits and explain why they need it, and whether it's for their own benefit or for the management's benefit or for the organization's benefit. You need to explain that and engage some local champions to help you explain it. Most of these things don't work well if it's just the IT people pushing them. It's got to be some local people in the teams that do it as well. Infrastructure. So again, we still get a lot of questions around, I'm on a really bad internet connection and I want to put everything up in the cloud. Sometimes that's not a great idea. So that's why you do need to get your devices right and your network. And so, for example, if you want to use co-authoring and some of these cool document management tools that you get with SharePoint, then you should probably use Office 2016. Things like Office 2010 are no longer supported by Microsoft anymore. So we encourage you to upgrade to a pretty recent version. Make sure you resource it. So I've said a few times throughout it that, it's pretty easy. You can dabble with Planner or whatever it is. But in other scenarios, like an email migration or a document migration with a new intranet or Power BI dashboards, you probably need help with that. So if you've got internal people that can learn it, great. Just give them the time to do that. Or get an external person, or people to spend more time on these sort of webinars or do-it-yourself workshops. So regardless of whether it's internal or external, you need to resource it and allocate that time. The other ones are just exploring opportunities for efficiencies around lists, forms, OneNote. So it's almost like an amnesty on show me all the bad processes or the Excel sheets where you're overusing them and you're complaining about them. They're the opportunities where you can get lists and forms, or even Power Apps and InfoPath and Flow to really create some of those efficiencies. Reducing travel. So Info Exchange are all across the country in New Zealand, and we get away quite nicely with Skype for Business and Teams and OneNote and those sort of things. So we're seeing people saving a lot of money in travel and meetings by having them online. And then you put that money back towards the clients or whatever else you want to do. So the other one is Power BI dashboards. Data is the way forward and the new gold in the sector. So having those dashboards to really display the data is a great opportunity. And the lastly, but probably most importantly, is change management. So make sure you're engaging stakeholders, doing training, doing communication before you just go off and implement these new tools. All right, so I just want to quickly run through these last two slides and then I'll save time for questions. But really, this is just a whole heap of links to online resources. So this is whether it's Microsoft or some online training or virtual academy or some information down the bottom about privacy and security. These will be in the slide deck so that when Tina sends these to you, you'll be able to link off on those. So we don't need to talk through those, but often people say, yeah, can you come and run some training on how to use Word? And the first thing I always say is, well, have a look at the online training first and the online resources, because Microsoft spent a lot of money on building those. So you may as well at least see if they're suitable first. And in addition to the stuff Microsoft are doing, Connecting Up and us are doing a few other things around helping not-for-profits in Australia and New Zealand. So the readiness assessments are where one of our consultants works you through a process to understand how your organisation, this is specific to you, can move to Office 365. And at the end of it, you get a report, a 15-page report that says, here's how you should go to Office 365, how you would go about it, and if you need third-party help, here's how much roughly to expect that will cost. So it's a tailored report for your organisation. And that's only $100 that you buy through Connecting Up or TechSoup. We're also doing the DIY workshop. So as I said, I just finished a basic SharePoint one over the last few weeks where we had 3 one-hour webinars. Now, I've also got one coming up around Advanced Office, which is more about if you've already got an intranet and you want to use it better, or you want to start using Forms or Power BI and those sort of things, then click on that link. There's a webinar series coming up soon. And we do these webinars fortnightly. So I think you've just missed a few rounds of data Power BI webinars, but there'll be other webinars coming up in the next few weeks and on an ongoing basis. If all that's not enough and you still need help, then yeah, people like Info Exchange can come out and help you with a migration or strategic advice or do SharePoint for you as either a once-off or an ongoing basis. So I did a finish up just with 1 minute to go and allow some time for questions. I'm happy to hang around, or people can contact me directly on that email or phone. And particularly if you've got some technical or some really specific questions. So I'll hand over to Tina to see if there's any questions.
Sure, we've got a few questions to go through. So Peter wants to know, when doing board collaboration, why not use Teams instead of SharePoint?
Yeah, it really depends on the functionality. So Teams can do board collaboration. It depends on how your board work and whether they would use that discussion feature and Power BI. So it is a tricky thing with Office 365 where they often develop two different apps that do very similar things. So traditionally, if you had asked a year ago, I would have said SharePoint. If you ask me in a year, I'll probably say Teams. So right now you could do either, but it also depends what else you're using across your organization. So if your staff are all using Teams and familiar with Teams and you don't use SharePoint for anything, then yes, I would use Teams. But if you've got an intranet, you're using everything in that, then you can do SharePoint. Office 365 groups can help as well, where it gives you an email distribution group, it gives you a OneNote, it gives you a SharePoint site, and it can give you a team. So you can use all of those tools. So really it's around the user interface, what functionality they need. So do they need a calendar? Do they need documents? Do they need tasks? Do they have discussions? Do they need video? And yeah, if they're using all of those things, then I agree, Peter, that Teams is probably a good solution.
Scott says, thinking about Delve, how does it handle staff shared by more than one manager or business unit?
So Delve pulls the information from your Office 365 or Active Directory. So for example, in our Active Directory, there's a clear org chart around who people report to. So essentially Delve will just pull the information from wherever it's stored, whether it's your Office 365 permissions or Active Directory. So I actually haven't personally seen that scenario in Delve where they technically report to two. I think it actually would handle it, but I'd have to test that for you. So I can test that for you, but it really will pull, I believe, back in Active Directory or the org chart where that information lives. I think most of those systems don't handle, reporting to two people.
Jenny says, I currently use Kanban as Planner. As Planner does not have recurring tasks, do you know if this is on the roadmap?
I will need to check that one. I thought you could actually do recurring tasks in Planner. The other option, if Planner isn't meeting your needs, is you could use SharePoint hosting Microsoft Project. So Project definitely does that. But let me check that for you, Jenny, because I actually thought Planner did do the recurring tasks. And if it doesn't, it wouldn't surprise me if it is on the roadmap. So I might have to get back to you about that one.
Okay. Scott says, is there any reason to not use AAD Connect? Currently, our Office 365 and AD environments appear to be the same, but they are not. Our provider had a reason for not doing this at the time of implementation.
I don't believe so. I'd need to know more about the specific scenario, but most of our clients are using AAD Connect. So most of them that have an Active Directory, which means all of your staff user information is in the Active Directory. AAD Connect sits on a server. So not having a server may be the reason why they're not doing that. But you also can configure AAD Connect to not synchronize particular users or particular groups. So even if you are syncing, then you can configure that. And what AAD Connect does, and particularly if you've already started, AAD Connect actually creates the user accounts for you. So there may have been a complication where he'd already created the user accounts or he'd wanted them to be different. AAD Connect is a one-way sync. So it syncs from your Active Directory up to Office 365. So it actually doesn't sync the other way back. If you want two-way synchronization, it gets a little bit more complicated with Azure AD or Federation services as well. So I'd need to dig in a little bit more into that scenario.
Okay, and he wants to know if Skype for Business telephony is available in New Zealand.
So not through Telstra, I don't believe, but you can use it from a hosted platform. So essentially what a lot of our clients do is have it through a third party telephony specialist who hosts Skype for Business on their servers, and then you access their servers and use telephony through that. So I don't know of a telephony provider off the top of my head based in New Zealand, but there also wouldn't be any reason why you couldn't use an Australian-based telephony provider as well. So assuming your network's good quality. So
Okay. Justine says, we are based in New Zealand and have been thinking about replacing our file server. Is there someone we can talk to see if SharePoint is suitable for us?
yeah, so I would start with the webinar. So I believe all the recordings are online, Tina, of previous, just the free webinars. So we do free
They're all
webinars
on
on
our
SharePoint.
learning centre.
There we go. So I'd have a look in the Learning Centre around the SharePoint webinars that we've done recently, or register for the next one. The other one that we did recently was the 3-week DIY workshop, which is was all about basic SharePoint. So that might be helpful as well. The other thing from a Microsoft partner perspective, obviously Info Exchange can have, or I can have a discussion with you about that, but there is a Microsoft platform called Pinpoint, which helps organizations find Microsoft partners. So if you desperately wanted someone that was based in your town, then you can look on something like Pinpoint, or even contact Microsoft in New Zealand for a local partner. Also, depending on your size, there's a platform called Fast Track, which allows you to access Microsoft resources to help with the implementation.
Okay. So Joanne says, I work remotely and want to use Skype for Business, but don't get sound on my remote viewer. Would you know if I can add Skype for Business to my personal Office 365 account so I can run meetings?
So I need to clarify what you mean by remote viewer. But yeah, typically Skype for Business isn't included in a personal sort of free Office 365. However, if you have a work organization license for Skype, you should be able to install the Skype for Business on your local PC and make calls through that. If you're talking about remote viewer as in a Citrix environment or a remote desktop environment, yeah, there are often limitations if you go through that. But if you choose not to go when you open up your PC, just don't open your remote viewer and use your PC to make a Skype for Business call. I would explore that first. The other factors with Skype for Business to think about is, do you need a dial-in number for these meetings where it's actually a phone number, similar to these GoToWebinars where there's a phone number that you can call if the data connection isn't great? That requires an E5 license. The other things to think about when you're making Skype calls are, do you have a good headset? Do you have a microphone or a camera in your laptop? Otherwise, you might need to buy a little webcam or a microphone or a headset. Or there's even some of our clients, you can buy a little Logitech, is the one we've been buying, where it's got a camera, a speaker, and a microphone, all built into a little tubey-looking thing for about $200, and that's a good sort of video conferencing cheap setup. So there's a few different factors when you're thinking about Skype for Business or video conferencing, and that would apply to any tool. So I think probably more the issue is your remote viewer. So you should be able to use your organizational account, just not using the remote viewer. So I hope that helped.
Okay, one last one. Peter says, what is the core business reason to move from the Google Business Plan to Microsoft to MS365?
Yeah, I think it's basically weighing up each different application. So essentially, you're comparing, Gmail with Exchange Online. You're comparing forms with Office, SharePoint. You're referring Google Hangouts to Skype for Business. So it's doing a bit of that comparison and making sure each one works. The main driver behind most people choosing Office 365 is because it's really well integrated with the what they're used to, which is Word, Excel, Outlook. So if you're moving people from Word, Excel, Outlook to Google Sheets and those sort of things, it's a massive, massive change. So that would be one of the drivers, and trying to use both platforms. So having Word, Excel, Outlook, and then Gmail, it's not as seamless. So I would weigh up all the different applications, but everything always comes back to your requirements. So what do you need first, and then choose the platform based on what you need. The other thing is you look at the companies and you look at the reputation and the security and the location of servers and all those other factors as well. So have a look at the Microsoft Trust Center around security of data and those things as well. Have a look at the roadmap to see what's coming and what's under development. So look, they're both good platforms. So I'm not saying, it's like, sometimes it's like comparing a Ford and a Holden. Sometimes it's personal taste. Sometimes it's comes down to functionality.
Great, that's it for questions. Was there anything that you wanted to add, Matt?
No, just feel free to get in touch. Sorry if some of these the questions and answers are hard when there's limited information, but I'm happy to sort of follow that up if anyone's got any specifics. But just saying, good luck. Give it a chance. It's a very common, popular platform at the moment that's adding value to a lot of not-for-profits. So that's why we vouch for it, and we encourage you to at least explore it, do your due diligence. It's great that you're coming in these sessions and learning more about it. So good luck, and hope to see you in future webinars or workshops or readiness sessions.
Great. Thanks very much, Matt, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've all learnt a lot from this presentation and that all of your questions have been answered. If you have any questions that do come to mind later or any feedback about this webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we'll answer those questions offline. You can also contact Matt directly via the information on your screen. So don't forget that the recording will be available within the next week, and a link will be sent to you with the slides as well, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks everyone. Thanks Matt.